probably one of my favorite and most stressful teaching experiences happened in Colonia, Segovia, where we went and just stopped by this house, and the mother of the house let us in, and we were just out in her yard, just talking with her and a friend about the gospel, and they had been very strong Seventh-day Adventists, but had just left that church a couple months earlier over a dispute with how a member was treated. And she was very knowledgeable about the Bible and had a lot of questions and doubts about Seventh-day worship, or rather like about us going to church on Sunday rather than Saturday. And we just tried the go-to scriptures, like from Acts and things, and those didn't quite do the trick. So it was like that required a lot of intense study, and just like really trying to do what we could to reach her. And at one point during a lesson with her, I felt like we should invite her to be baptized for a particular date. And I thought that the date was like a little far away, but that's what I felt that I should invite her to do. And so we invited her to be baptized on that date, and then she was just shocked, like, "Well, that's like so early. Like how can I be baptized that early? I studied in my last church for 2 years before being baptized." And I was just thinking, like, well, why did I feel prompted to invite her to be baptized on that specific day? And then I ended up leaving the area, and my companion continued to teach her. And eventually found out that, she told me later, she's like, "Do you remember when you invited me to be baptized on that day?" I'm like, "Yeah, I remember." And she's like, "Well, that's not the day I was baptized, but that's the day that I knew I needed to be baptized." And so it was just really neat to have that experience, and just that confirmation that there's a reason that we feel the promptings we do, even if it seems to turn out terribly right at first. And so I was able to go visit that area later when she was baptized. And so that was a really special experience, to just be able to see her progress. And then her husband was so upset with what had happened in their last church that he had said that he would never set foot in any church ever again. And during the time I was there, we interacted with him, and he was a very friendly guy, but we never taught him because he wasn't interested. But then after I left, he started to support his wife. He went to her baptism, and then later he started going to church with her, and then later he decided to be baptized too. And they've since been sealed, I believe, and have become temple workers. So that was just really neat to see how they went from having a lot of doubts about the church to being temple workers. One thing that I learned on the mission was the importance of focusing personal and companionship study on investigators and seeking answers to their questions and trying to receive revelation as to how best to help them. And by having that kind of directed study, it helped, our studies be a lot more fulfilling and productive. So in my first area, we had a hard time getting people to progress. It was a place where people were very open to receiving us, but not particularly open to doing anything about it. And in my second transfer there, we still hadn't baptized anyone. And we were working with a member and encouraging her to give us referrals, to refer us to her friends. And she was a bit reluctant about it, but finally referred us to her friend Maria. And we went to visit Maria, and when we went to her door, she seemed not incredibly pleased to see us. But then we mentioned the name of her friend, and she just suddenly brightened up and was like, "Oh, come in." And so we started teaching Maria, and so over the course of time, she finally started coming to church. I think one anecdote which reflects something of the Argentine character is we told her that, okay, so church, like we're just trying to get her ready for church, and like church starts at 9, so what time will you need to be up to be able to get ready for that? She's like, 10:30. And so we found that kind of amusing. But she ended up going to church and continuing to go to church. One really special experience with her was I forget which lesson we were teaching, but a question came up about the word of wisdom which we hadn't taught yet. And we just mentioned briefly what it was without like really going in depth teaching it. We were gonna like teach the full lesson the next time. And then the next time we saw her, we found out she had already given up drinking coffee, even though we hadn't like really taught the lesson. We just mentioned that it was something that we didn't partake of. So it was really neat to see her faith in that instance. And then she ended up being baptized a few weeks later. And so it was really neat to see how the value that there was in having her friend refer her to us and her friend be there to support her and to help her in her transition to becoming a new member. And I think most of the successful stories or successful teaching experiences with investigators came with the help of members, and with members, even if members didn't refer us to them, with members helping in the teaching, or members being there to fellowship people, like when they came to church. So that is a really important part of missionary work.